Hey guys, today we're going to be checking out the second part of the Fach system, this time focusing on the gentlemen of opera. For anyone who's unfamiliar, Fach is the word we use in opera to classify operatic roles, what characters exist in operas. And I just want to take a sec for anyone who's new and for the commenters on the first part of this Fach series, and just say it again, Fachs are roles, not singers. I think about it like a TV show. If, for example, I want to show an example of comedy TV, I have to pick an actor in a comedy TV show just to be able to demonstrate what the actual genre is. And whether you subjectively agree that that actor is the best choice for the genre isn't the point. The point is to demonstrate the genre itself. So, you're very welcome to flood the comments with your opinions about the singers I chose that you think aren't the best for the Fach we're listening to, but just remember that you'll look kinda silly if you say it's outright wrong, because, again, singers are not Fachs. Roles are Fachs. And today we're going to listen to the types of roles that any singer could perform in opera, whether you think it's done well or not. Okay, we're on the same page now. I can feel it. Thank you for your patience. Let's go have a listen to our guys. Last time we talked about these roles here, which are all for the ladies, and if you missed that video, I'll link it in the cards above. But today we'll pick things up here with the highest voice type in our male roles, the countertenor. The countertenor has a range from G3 to E5. I think of these like male models, blending masculine and feminine traits together to create a new kind of hero. They are fully mature men who happen to sing in a very strong head voice or falsetto. They do usually have tenor or baritone chest voices, so they do sound lower when they speak, what we would expect from a mature man, but their singing voice is just much higher. A lot of these kinds of roles grew out of the castrato tradition, which was outlawed in the 18th century, but audiences were still used to and still wanted that very high male sound. So you'll find a lot of roles for countertenor in Baroque opera. There's also a bit of a new wave of countertenors taking on the roles that were originally written for mezzo-sopranos. For example, it's not uncommon to see a countertenor playing Cherubino in The Marriage of Figaro, a role that was originally written for a mezzo-soprano. And like I said, countertenors were quite popular in the Baroque era, so Handel particularly is all but required repertoire for countertenors. But then the voice type fell pretty far out of fashion during the Romantic and post-Romantic movements, so we don't see more roles for countertenor being written until really the end of the 20th century. But they do seem to be getting representation again though in modern music, which is awesome to see. These would be roles like Giulio Cesare in Giulio Cesare, Orfeo in Orfeo ed Euridice, and Oberon in A Midsummer Night's Dream. And I know I said they do a lot of Baroque stuff, but I think it's important to show modern music as well. So this is a clip of Anthony Roth Constanzo singing the title role in Philip Glass's Akhnaten. All right, and next up we have our comic or character tenors. These guys have a range from C3 to B4, and like all tenors, they have a high male voice that doesn't sound feminine, but this is a special kind of tenor that doesn't have to have a particularly pretty voice. These are usually clown-like characters in opera, so they need to have strong physical comedy and voices that portray the character, not necessarily the singer. These roles were actually usually written for people who weren't opera singers by trade, but they could do justice to the music and, more importantly, the character. And if they are opera singers and they have a pretty voice, they usually don't do just these kinds of roles. There aren't too many roles to choose from in this Fach, so we'll pick the most famous by far to show here. This is an English version of Monostatos' aria from Mozart's The Magic Flute, and holy crap, I love this interpretation of the opera so much. I feel like Mozart would have been so here for it.
I not like me, no one ever chooses me, no one ever chooses me. What should I be sad and lonely?
Next we have our lyric tenors. Lyric tenors have a range from C3 to C5, and these are our young tenors, the male equivalent to our light and lyric sopranos. They're like contemporary dancers. Smooth, graceful, young, handsome. And by young, I mean they're young male characters, students, or college-age kids. It doesn't necessarily mean the singer is young, just the role. These tenors usually have quite pretty voices, fairly light, pleasant to listen to, and the characters are usually love interests. But it's young love, you know? Like they're not really going to be involved in tragedies, you know, at least not any bigger than like the latest breakup. These would be roles like Alfredo in La Traviata, Tamino in The Magic Flute, Count Almaviva in The Barber of Seville. And for this one, I chose Nemorino's Una furtiva lagrima from Donizetti's Elixir of Love. Next up is the spinto tenor, again with a range from C3 to C5, and these are slightly more demanding tenor roles that do need an extended upper range. It doesn't necessarily mean they need higher notes, just that they have to be able to maintain a high tessitura with a more piercing sound to carry over a larger orchestra. I think like Italian gondoliers singing their Italian folk songs, you know? And whereas the lyric tenor from before is usually found in classical operas, like the actual classical time period, these are roles that you'll find more in the Romantic era. They're still lovely voices, still young characters, but maybe a little more full, a little more round, and the characters maybe in their mid to late 20s or early 30s instead of late teens. These would be roles like Calaf in Turandot, Florestan in Fidelio, Don José in Carmen. And for this one, we're going to listen to Cavarados's E lucevan le stelle from Tosca. Alright, and the last in our tenor category is the Helden tenor. These have a slightly lower range from B2 to C5, and these are the bodybuilders of tenors. They're all the high piercing quality of the spinto tenor before them, with the weight of a baritone in their lower range. So they're loud and big and rich, and they carry over big orchestras that have lots of brass in them, and like literally brass, trumpets, trombones. These are our Wagnerian tenors. So it's roles like Otello from Otello, Tannhäuser from Tannhäuser, Tristan from Tristan and Isolde, lots of title roles here. And of course, we have to do some Wagner. So this is an excerpt from Siegfried, part of Wagner's Ring Cycle. Moving on to the next category of male singers, we have our baritones. First up is the leggero baritone, and we're also going to tackle the lyric baritone with it because they have almost exactly the same qualities. It's just that the leggero voice is younger, what you'd find in young male singers, who will eventually probably grow into the lyric baritone Fach. These baritones have a range from B2 to A flat 4, and these are beautiful voices. The Goldilocks of male singers. Not too high, not too low, milk chocolate. They're sweet, beautiful, charismatic, and usually characters you're supposed to like. They also need the ability to sing both long legato phrases and coloratura, so I guess they're kind of like tango ballroom dancers. Smooth, sharp and quick when needed, and sexy. These are roles like Guglielmo from Così fan tutte, Papageno from The Magic Flute, Belcore from The Elixir of Love. But of course, we have to pull what's possibly the most famously referenced operatic aria ever, Figaro's Largo al factotum from The Barber of Seville.
Figaro, 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 Figaro.
Next up, we have our cantabile baritone. These guys have a similar range from A2 to A flat 4. What immediately pops into my head is just Gaston from Beauty and the Beast in terms of the character. This is the baritone's equivalent of the basic bitch, not because it's simple, but just because there are so many roles. These are more cutting baritones, more metallic and dramatic. They're also more lyrical, so they don't need much agility in the role. It's all about being traditionally masculine, hairy chest, good with the ladies, and usually the characters are also supposed to be, ruggedly handsome. So these are roles like Don Giovanni from Don Giovanni, Marcello from La Bohème, Sharpless from Madame Butterfly, Onegin from Eugene Onegin, and the list goes on and on. But here we'll go for another very famous cantabile baritone role. This is Escamillo's Toreador from Carmen. Moving into something slightly smaller, we have our Verdi baritone, exactly the same range from A2 to A flat 4, and we won't spend too much time here because there aren't too many roles for this kind of voice, but it's essentially a high baritone role. These are usually bad guys. Like if Scar sang opera, the orchestra is going to be larger, so these are baritones that need to be able to sit in a high tessitura for a long time, carrying over that orchestra. That means they're less dark for a baritone and more pingy, what we call squillo. And like I said, there aren't a whole heck of a lot of roles here, so I'll just show the most famous. This is Scarpia's Te Deum from Tosca. And of course, we've had all of our other Wagnerian voice types. We can't leave out the baritones. This is the Helden baritone, with a range from G2 to F sharp 4. It's the biggest guy in the room. Think characters like the Mountain in Game of Thrones, or, like Zeus. And just like the Helden tenor before it, this is the powerful baritone. It commands attention. It's very mature, has a lot of strength. These are roles like Iago from Otello, Jack Rance from La Fanciulla del West, Simon Boccanegra from Simon Boccanegra. And for this one, we're going to take a look at Macbeth's aria from Verdi's Macbeth. Okay, and here we get into a little bit of gray territory because we can cross into either bass or baritone roles depending on the singer. So this is our lyric bass baritone or high lyric bass. If it's a baritone, the range will be G2 to F sharp 4, and for basses it's a little bit lower, E2 to F4. These characters have like real grandpa energy. The singers need to be comfortable in the lower end of the baritone tessitura, projecting over orchestras without relying on the higher notes to be their volume, but they also need to have the depth of the bass range with strong, full, resonant low notes. And this type of voice got really popular with the Romantics, particularly composers that were into Verismo. So these are roles like Bluebeard from Bluebeard's Castle, Don Alfonso from Così fan tutte, Mephistopheles from Faust. But I want to show a personal favorite here of an excerpt from Carlisle Floyd's Susanna. This is Samuel Ramey, again, singing the character Blitch.
Where they was, brethren and sistern, they was, he was saved, that was it, and he died that night, plumb-stead to death, and his soul went to eternal fire.
Okay, and the last of our bass baritones, second of our basses. Again, these two are generally the same. It depends on the singer, but the role can be tackled by guys who identify as basses or baritones, depending on if they have the right vocal fit for the role itself. They have the same range as the lyric category, G2 to F sharp 4 for baritones, E2 to F4 for basses, and they do have all the same characteristics of the lyric bass, just bigger. So they're not grandpa anymore, they're a little bit more active than that. I'd think like an older military general or something. Again, they hang out in the middle of the baritone range. They dip down into some really delicious full bass notes from time to time. They just happen to do it over bigger orchestras. So these are roles like Boris from Boris Godunov, Casper from Der Freischütz, but most of us probably think Wagner again. So this time we'll do Wotan from the Ring Cycle. Okay, and now officially moving into the bass category, our first role here is the young bass. Now, a bass, of course, has the lowest voice, so this range is from E2 to F4, and these are, as the name suggests, young basses. And again, by young here, we mean a young character, not necessarily a young singer. And like other basses, they have quite a low voice, they hang out in a lower tessitura, but the roles just aren't going to be quite as demanding, and because of that, there aren't too many roles out there, just like there aren't too many young basses out there. I'm talking like teenagers with a really low voice. And I'm not saying they don't exist. I'm just saying if you're a young bass, you're probably a little tired of people being surprised by how you sound because it's just not common. So this would be a role like Mazzetto in Don Giovanni, but also Colline and La Bohème. And I am a La Bohème fangirl, so that's what we're going to go with. And this excerpt's in English because I'm a rebel.
Now that our time together is done, I thank you, my friend, O most faithful of companions. Farewell, farewell.
Moving on to our buffo bass, and here I'll combine lyric and dramatic because the roles are quite similar in terms of character. It's just dependent on the singer, and in this case, the range. For lyric buffos, it's E2 to F4, same as before, and for dramatic buffos, it's C2 to F4, so a little bit lower. And I know it's true for all Fachs, but this one really is a type of role and not just a voice type. Buffo describes comedic relief. So a buffo character is a comedic relief character, and a buffo opera, for example, is just a lighthearted, silly opera. You can think of the trope of dads in commercials who don't know anything, like they're always tripping over stuff or not knowing how to do laundry. Yeah, that energy. For whatever reason, audiences really liked bumbling basses. Maybe it's that juxtaposition between perceived responsibility and complete incompetence, but that's who these guys are. Singing-wise, these basses need to be very comfortable with coloratura and also patter singing, which is basically like if Busta Rhymes sang opera. These are roles like Don Pasquale in Don Pasquale, Dr. Dulcamara from the Elixir of Love, Leporello from Don Giovanni, and here we'll have a listen to Don Magnifico from Rossini's Cinderella.
In una scuffietta, fra sorrisi e complimenti. Baroncina, si ricordi quell'affare, tu si ricordi quell'affare. E già m'intende, senza argento parla ai sordi, la manina alquanto stende, fa una piastra strucciolar.
All right, last one. You still with me? These are our basso profondos, or the dramatic basso profondo. Their range is C2 to F4, but we'll get back to that in a second. This is the bottom of the bottom, the basement of the voice types. This is what the earth would sound like if it could speak. You know, like it's ancient, it's profound, it's solid, it's got a kind of inevitability to it. If other voice types are like water flowing over you, this is like a solid wall slowly pressing into you. prelude. Now, the difference between the regular basso profondo and the dramatic basso profondo is like all other dramatic roles. The dramatic singer is just, more powerful. But regardless of whether it's normal or powerful, it's always going to be deep, deep, deep. These are roles like Don Bartolo from The Marriage of Figaro, Il Commendatore from Don Giovanni, Rocco from Fidelio. But to go back to the range, a few of these singers can actually go quite a bit lower, although it's not usually written into the operatic repertoire. This is a certain kind of basso profondo called octavists, and usually you'll find stuff written for them in the Russian Orthodox tradition of choral music. So to finish this whole thing off, here's an example of a whopping F1 from Alyabev's cherubic hymn. We did it. Now, of course, you can probably tell that there are all kinds of subfachs and even further differentiations between roles in opera, but the most important thing to know is it's just not one size fits all. Every role has unique markers that make it more of a fit for some singers than others, kind of like matching athletes to sports, or, yes, actors to TV shows. If you missed the ladies' version of this list, you can check that out here. Otherwise, you guys know the drill. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you next time on Scores Unstitched.